Hi, I'm Kevin with Ri3D's team Redux, and today we're going to be going through and talking about some tasks that you can do before kickoff or right after kickoff with any idle hands. So you can go and start doing pneumatic fittings for your solenoids, any of your motors, if you need to put on connectors like Andersons or spade crimps on them, and then also you can set up all of your radios as well.
This video on First Updates Now is made possible by viewers like you and also the following sponsors. At Kettering University, over 30% of the student population was in high school robotics. These same students have received a portion of over $7 million in scholarships. Scholarship applications for FIRST students are now available. Get more information at kettering.edu/first. SOLIDWORKS is free for FIRST teams. Over 80% of U.S. engineering schools and 370,000 plus companies use SOLIDWORKS to design great products. SOLIDWORKS can help you design a great robot on desktop or on the cloud. Go to solidworks.com/first to register your team.
So let's go ahead and get into some of the specifics. So right now we're going to go ahead and try to set up our radio. So we've had a lot of issues before the event here where they were unable to actually get the radio set up. So some of the different tricks and tips that I have for actually getting your radio flashed is we'll load up your FRC radio configuration utility. You'll need to possibly install Java. You'll need to install some other things for it. But any of those things, it'll say, hey, you need to install this. So there'll just be a pop-up. It'll say, hey, you need to install Java. You'll just download the Java runtime environment, install that, and you'll be good to go. One of the big things that you're going to need to make sure you do is go to your control panel and disable all of the other network adapters. So you don't want any Wi-Fi, you don't want your Bluetooth. Just turn off everything other than the Ethernet adapter that you're actually going to be using for programming your radio. So we'll go to the control panel, go to network and internet, and then you'll do view network status, and then change adapter settings. And then you'll go click on all of the different adapters that are not the thing that you will be programming your radio with or configuring your radio with, and we'll just say disable this network device. And we'll go over to Bluetooth and say disable this network device. And then now the only thing that is running is the Ethernet network. And we will go back to the radio configuration utility. So it's on the Ethernet. That's the only option that we have for the network interfaces. We'll hit OK, and then you'll type in your team number. Right now we're using 9999 for our robot in 3 days. And then over here, we're adding on a bot number 1. So the robot name allows you to have the Wi-Fi broadcast with an additional append on. So it'll be 9999 bot 1. So if you have multiple robots, you could have practice robot. You could name your robot whatever you want. And then if you have multiple robots or multiple access points, then you'll be able to identify which one's which. So this one is bot 1. And then what I had to do to actually get the radios to flash correctly was then load the firmware. So we'll load the firmware onto it. It'll identify the radio, and then it'll load firmware onto it, erase everything that's on there currently, and then after that, we'll configure the radio. If this doesn't run correctly, we can go ahead and power cycle it. So we're going to go ahead and power cycle it. And wait for a second. Now radio found, flashing firmware, so power cycling it started the process. And power cycling just means unplugging the radio and then plugging it back in. If you're using any of the orange connectors that we have for injecting PoE, then you'll need to unplug that as well as your barrel connector as well. And then you'll just plug in one of those again, and now it's currently flashing the firmware. So some other things that teams can do before the build season is insert any of the fittings into solenoids. So solenoids will come without any fittings on them, so you'll need to purchase fittings separately and then insert them into your solenoids. That allows you to have push connect fittings right there ready for you whenever you need to use your pneumatics, and then you can easily insert your pneumatic tubing into your solenoids. Another thing that solenoids will generally have are just bare pigtails. or there won't be a connector at all. So you'll need to get yourself connectors and then put whatever your desired end crimp on the end. So right now we're using ferrules, which takes stranded wire and then turns it into something that you can actually insert into the pneumatic module. So it makes it a lot easier to actually insert in there. If you have stranded wires, you need to use a screwdriver to open up the port in there, and then there's a spring that opens up. But if you have a ferrule, you're able to just take the end and then just insert it in, and then it's in there already. So it allows you to save some time, and then also it keeps the copper wire nice and neat whenever you're inserting it in. There's no strafe wires going off of the wire so that they don't have any shorts, and it keeps things nice and neat and tidy. Another thing that we recommend for doing before the build season is attaching any connectors to your wires. So a lot of the wires that come from AndyMark have these wires that come off as just pigtails, and then you can put on whatever end connector you want. So one that's really amazing are Andersons. What's amazing about Andersons is they only go together one direction. They're keyed. So they have these nice one-way connectors so that you can only plug them in the correct way. There's also the ability to weld them together, so you can get welded sections of these that are already ultrasonically welded together. So there's only one set of colors that it can be, and they don't fall apart. And then it's just as simple as taking your wires and then plugging them into your motor controllers whenever you're ready to go. So you can add your Andersons on your motor controllers, you can add your Andersons onto these motors. And then for 775s, there are a lot of different boards. So here is a Refire Solutions board that we have attached, and you solder it on to the contacts on the 775, and then there's also Andersons that get soldered on. So there are some that also will have encoders built in. This one is a nice, simple solution that just has Andersons. So it's just a plug and play kind of a thing now that you can just plug it in with the Andersons onto a motor controller, and then you're ready to go. Thanks for watching, and make sure to check out all of Robot in 3D's Redux's videos on Fun's YouTube channel.
This video on First Updates Now is made possible by viewers like you and also the following sponsors. SOLIDWORKS is free for first teams. Over 80% of US engineering schools and 370,000 plus companies use SOLIDWORKS to design great products. SOLIDWORKS can help you design a great robot on desktop or on the cloud. Go to solidworks.com/first to register your team. At Kettering University, over 30% of the student population was in high school robotics. These same students have received a portion of over $7 million in scholarships. Scholarship applications for first students are now available. Get more information at kettering.edu/first. Thank you to all of our suppliers and sponsors for the Robot in 3 Days Redux and Kettering Bulldogs programs.